Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest episode of Strange Playgrounds. Now, something that's been on my mind a lot recently. I read a lot of stuff, and I mean voraciously. That I've got so much stuff on the go at the moment, from short story collections and anthologies to plays to classic literature. Just so much going on. I finished rereading Frankenstein recently. I've moved on to the case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I'm also reading The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. Totally gone on Ursula K. Le Guin at the moment. She featured largely in my adolescence, in like my late childhood rather, my early teenage years. But it was at a time when I didn't really pay that much attention to authors as such. It wasn't that important. The only reason she occurred is because I used to have bags and shelves full of books, and some of her work happened to be there, like the Earthsea books and that kind of thing. So I'm rereading a few of those at the moment, and right now I'm rereading The Lathe of Heaven, and it is stunning. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. It's weighty, it's difficult, it's very complex. There's a lot of stuff going on in it, and it's a very weighty, heavy, big read, but very bloody good. I mean, it is proper science fiction, and by proper science fiction, I mean it's not Star Wars. It's science fiction that is dealing with ideas, with existentialism, with the nature of reality, with probabilities in terms of how we might perceive reality in the future given certain discoveries or technological innovations. It's very clever. And The Lathe of Heaven is highly existential it's a sort of moral exercise in the sense that it presents this situation where you have a man who can, when he dreams in a particular way, i.e. particularly lucidly, he changes reality around himself. Like the whole of reality reorients itself around him. So histories that did exist are undone and a new history is established around him. And his psychologist finds that out. And for what appear to be moral reasons, he starts inducing this dream state through hypnosis and by using a machine that he's developed. And he uses the state to alter reality to make it better. However, the alterations that he introduces, though they might appear to be moral, are limited by the nature of human imagination and the degrees of human faculty. So often the ways in which the ostensibly more moral or better or more humanitarian situation comes about is through very anti-humanitarian means. So, for example, at one point he tries to solve the problem of overpopulation. How does that happen? Of course, a new history is established where there was a mass plague which kills a significant portion of humanity on the earth. He tries to stop all war and all poverty and all discrepancy and conflict between human populations. How does that happen? An alien race occurs which invades, which humanity is then united in trying to defend itself against. It's that kind of thing. It's very clever. It's very interesting, because it looks at these things from both a very broad moral perspective, but also from a personal perspective, i.e. what is the morality of what the Doctor is doing here? Is it moral to induce this man to dream, to change reality involuntarily? Is it moral to use this tool at all? Because it effectively makes the manipulator God. It places the finite human being in the place of God. And is there some morality here? It's a Frankensteinian story in that regard. It's Frankensteinian. It's the same dynamics. It's the same existential crisis. And it also looks at things from the perspective of the dreamer. So, knowing that he's doing this, what effect does it have on the man? And what effect does it have on the man to remember simultaneously contradictory histories. It's very, very cool in that regard. It's a beautiful book that plays with some really deep, brilliant ideas, and in a very adult and ambiguous way. I mean, that for me is a marker of philosophical complexity. It's a marker of consideration, ambiguity, and doubt, particularly in writing. I have a severe problem with writing that has a very particular agenda and has a very particular, it wants the reader to interpret it in a very particular way. So the likes of C.S. Lewis, the likes of Ender's Game, what's his name? Awful man. Can't even remember his name off the top of my head, but he's a terrible, terrible man. Ayn Rand is a very good example. Ayn Rand's stories are fucking awful. I honestly, I have no idea. I know there are lots of people out there who absolutely worship the ground Ayn Rand walks on, and I don't understand that. I don't understand it. I don't understand it philosophically. I don't understand it in terms of the literature because it's terrible. It is objectively terribly written. They may as well be pamphlets for her agenda because the stories are wafer thin, the characters are ridiculous, the situations are absurd, and they rely upon a synthesis of reality, a synthesis of reality that's almost cartoon-like in its simplicity. I loathe Ayn Rand's work, and I loathe the philosophy that's resulted from it, if you can call it that. Quite frankly, go and read Nietzsche. Go and read Nietzsche, from which Ayn Rand adopts most of her perspectives anyway, but does so in a mistaken way. She doesn't seem to understand what Nietzsche was trying to say with most of them. And don't get me wrong, Nietzsche's problematic too, but at least he's far more coherent and understandable and ambiguous than she is. I usually loathe writing that is absolute and that tries to coerce the reader into interpreting things in a very particular way. Good writing gives the readers the situation, and then it kind of suggests possibilities and then allows them to come to a conclusion based on their own engagement with the subject matter. And that's what Ursula K. Le Guin does throughout. It's what she does throughout. She is, if you want a philosophical writer, forget Ayn Rand, put her away. She appeals to teenagers and people who haven't grown up, quite frankly. Go read Ursula K. Le Guin. She's way better. She's way better. She's cleverer. She's a better writer. She's more ambiguous. She instead of synthesizing reality to fit in with a very cartoonish agenda that she tries to coerce the reader into adopting, she comments upon the innate complexity of reality, of human being, of human perception and psychology, and the structures that we've created, the histories that we've made. She treats the reader with a lot more respect. And in that regard, her stories are more sincere. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. That's what I was talking about when I first started this episode. Sincerity in writing is really important to me. It's something that readers and audiences can tell, by and large, even if they don't know what that is, even if they can't articulate it to themselves, why they are dissatisfied with a particular work, why they don't like it. Very often it's because of sincerity. And when I say sincerity, what do I mean? I mean that the writer, the creator, wants to do something with their work. They want to invest something in it. They feel passionately about it. It's not that they're just creating a work because they want a particular status. It's not because they want to be perceived in a particular way. It's because they want to change the world. They want to set up territory in the minds, hearts, and souls of their audiences, and thereby want to change the world. And insincerity is a real problem in fiction at the moment, particularly mainstream fiction, popular fiction, on a very broad spectrum. There's so much insincere work out there. Television is pervaded by it. Like mainstream television and cinema are pervaded by insincere work. Work that is, it's created to fulfill a particular template and to promote a particular agenda, and often a banal agenda. It's usually just to make money. It's usually nothing else. It's not to change the world. It's not to alter the perceptions of their audience. It's not to bring into question certain cultural meta-narratives or assumptions. It's just to make money. It's to get something out there that fulfills this template as determined by test audiences, by boardrooms, by multiple different writers and editors, by the dictates of studios and publishing houses and whatnot. It results in flaccid, soulless, insincere work. And there's a lot of it out there. There's a lot of people who write in particular, because writing is like fucking. Everyone thinks they can write. Whether they've sat down and done it and bled for it and actually failed at it, which you need to do, by the way. If you're going to get good, it's like playing Dark Souls. You need to get good. You need to fail like over and over and over and over again. I mean, I remember the litany, the years of failure that have dogged me, where stories that it seemed so good, but which I wasn't the equal of writing, were just abandoned. They had to be, because I couldn't write them. They were coming out shit, you know? It's only recently that I feel that I've got to a point where I can even be publishable, to be honest. Recent years, because that's how it works. That's how it works. It's a grind. It's something you need to work at all the fucking time and never stops, you know? But it's like fucking, people just assume they can do it. It's like driving, people just assume they can do it. It's like a lot of things. It's a craft. It takes time. It's like all of communication, actually. One of the big problems, and I think this is where it bleeds down from, one of the big problems we have, certainly in Anglophonic cultures, is that we don't treat our communication as an art or a craft. We treat it in a very capitalist, very utilitarian way. We treat it as something that you learn up to the point that it's functional, whereby people can vaguely understand your grunts or expressions, and then we just stop. We stop learning. We stop engaging. We don't try to refine the art of it. And that is a real problem. That is a real problem. It's a particular problem for people who do treat it in that way. And I will say I do. I have to, because of my job. I have to refine the way I communicate, because I communicate regularly with people whose communication is non-standard. So I have to learn and refine my communication. But I do it anyway. I do it anyway because I find it fascinating. I find it interesting. I like the art of conversation. But it is a problem, because when you engage with people who don't appreciate the art of conversation, certain subtleties and nuances and references and analogies, the mechanics of conversation are lost. You can't use ambiguity, you can't use inference, you can't use implication, you can't use analogy or cultural reference for people who don't understand those things. And so people misinterpret you when you're engaging on a complex way, or in a way that they've never been exposed to before, or never believed that they were worthy of being exposed to before. You get this problem where there is this miscommunication, which can end up in offence or whatever, because people feel inferior and therefore they react negatively. It's a bad place. It's a bad place to be in. It's something culturally we need to break. We need to start treating communication as an art, as something that's worthy of refinement, and something that we don't just stop learning when we're 5, which is the way most people are treated when it comes to their communication. And English is a language that relies upon that. It relies upon you learning more, because it is infinitely complex. It's not like, say, French, where, yeah, there are complexities to learn, but it's a very mechanical language. There are very definite ways of saying this and saying that. And once you've learnt them, and that's it. English isn't like that. English is this very mutable, artistic language where you can say the same thing in lots of different ways and bring out or emphasize certain different implications or significances of that statement by the way that you frame it. It's very weird in that regard, but I think that's where it comes from. I think that's why people have such disrespect for things like writing, where they think they can do it automatically because they think they can speak automatically. It's the same thing. And the raw fact of the matter is, most people don't refine their communication beyond, it's like 5 or 6 years old. They just stop. They just stop, barring things like learning new terms when it comes to things like new contexts like technology and whatnot. Most people just stop because, oh, it's good enough. Oh, I can vaguely communicate this, it's good enough, you know? Oh, they can say this word, they can say this phrase, it's good enough. And that comes down to parenting, obviously, and to culture at large, what we're exposed to. And that's why people assume that they can write. But as a result, it results in these entire like sub-industries of massively insincere work. 50 Shades of Grey is the epitome of it. It's the nadir of it, if you like, because 50 Shades of Grey is totally insincere. It's not erotic. The person who wrote it just has no idea about what they're talking about, has no idea how to write. They have no idea how to craft stories or sentences or how to communicate passion or the frisson that erotic fiction necessarily incorporates. It's bizarre, but it is the nadir of it because it sells, because people think that that is what it is. They think that that is the apex of erotic fiction when it's actually the nadir, because it's largely due to a capitalist structure. It's because the publishing industry is looking for what sells rather than what's good. And you can see that. I mean, if you go into any popular bookstore, go into like a W.H. Smith or something, which is kind of most people's exposure to bookstores, even go into Waterstones, where, yeah, you will find good stuff, but you'll find lots of crap as well. But populating the shelves of popular bookstores, it is just by the numbers shite. It is crap. It is insincere writing that only exists for the same reason that Mills and Boon exists, which is to just fulfill the template, to meet audience demand. And you know what? The audience don't know what's good for them. If they knew what's good for them, they'd be the writer, they'd be the creator, not the consumer. And as creators, we should be better than that. We should be better than that. We shouldn't just be giving audiences what they think they want. You wouldn't try it. You shouldn't even attempt it if that's what you're going to try and do. You should be giving them what they need. And what I find in a lot of fiction at the moment, in a lot of fiction in lots of mediums, is that it's not challenging, it's not questioning, it's not transgressive, it is reinforcing. It's reinforcing, and in that regard, it's insincere. It's not what art or fiction is for. It's not what it's for. There's no point. There's no point to it. And the reason that exists is because stuff that makes us uncomfortable, that makes us question our assumptions, is dangerous, and we don't like it often. We react negatively to it. We're conditioned to react negatively to it because we're in love with banality and comfort. It's a real problem. It's a real problem. So when you come across something that really challenges, that really does shudder you, that makes you feel uncomfortable, it should be revered. It should be treated with all due respect. And that's kind of what Ursula K. Le Guin does in almost all of her work. It's really cool. It's really beautiful. So like The Lathe of Heaven is amazing. It is absolutely incredible. Alongside that, I'm reading lots of stuff, actually. I'm reading so much stuff at the moment. I've just finished a series of splatterpunk stories, an anthology of splatterpunk stories, which is really bloody good. Splatterpunk is interesting. Like all subgenres of horror, it's interesting because it can either be very transgressive and very interesting, or it can be very banal. It can be very banal in the sense that because it's codified, because it has that label splatterpunk, you get this situation where people come to it with certain expectations. They expect a splatterpunk story to be this and this and this and this, and that's a problem. That's problematic. By its very definition, because it is punk, it shouldn't be giving you what you expect. It should be really challenging you. It should be upsetting you on an aesthetic level, if not a philosophical one, you know? This one is pretty good. It's the sequel to Fighting Back. It's Splatterpunk Forever. I was actually featured in Fighting Back, by the way. If you go and find that on Amazon, my short story Only Angels Know is in that, and it was very good. There's some imagery in it that's really fucking gross, but that's good. That's good. That's what you should be looking for, really. Not necessarily the gross imagery, if that doesn't appeal to you, but something that makes you feel uncomfortable, either on a philosophical level, on a cultural level, or on a political level. Something that challenges what you think you believe. That's what we all should be doing. I mean, that's what I mean. I will say this. I mean, my writing is never going to be popular because it's not that kind of writing. I'm never even sure if it's any good half the time. I need other people to tell me that because I write so weirdly. I'd never know. But one thing I do strive to do is make it legitimate. I try to make it sincere. I try to invest it with reality, with feelings, with emotions, with my own background, with my own neuroses, and use it to explore and express something real. Because when you do that, then you'll get frisson, then you'll get connection, then people will engage with it. Because we are all human beings, we will all have similar experiences, we'll have something that resonates there. Even if we are not the same people, even if we are from different cultures, we have different political backgrounds, we have different experiences of reality, there will be something that resonates if there is sincerity. But it's rare. I do find there's a lot of insincere fiction out there because there's a lot of people who just want to be writers. They think there's some prestige that comes with it, or they think that it's their purpose in life or something, and that's just not the way to go. I don't think anyway. I think if you want to tell a story, you should want to tell it for a reason. And certainly not because, I mean, it's the worst thing on earth to go into if you want to make money. It's the worst thing on earth. You know, most writers are poor as hell. Most authors are poor as hell. You don't make money out of writing. Most writers, most authors don't. The people like J.K. Rowling and Stephen King are the outliers. They are the outliers. They got lucky somewhere along the lines, you know? You can, the really sad fact of the matter is you can produce the best work ever. You can produce amazing epoch-making work and still be poor as hell. You can still be not well regarded. You can still be no one and nothing in your lifetime. I mean, look at H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft was no one and nothing in his lifetime. No one knew who H.P. Lovecraft was, apart from his friends. It wasn't until later, after his death, that his work started to be respected in the field. And for a long, long time, Edgar Allan Poe was the same. Edgar Allan Poe was exactly the same. He died destitute and penniless, in the drug addict in the gutter. So, sincerity is important, and putting aside ego, you know, not wanting the money, not wanting the accolades is really damn important. If you're doing it, then surely you must be doing it to change the world, to make the world better, to set up territory in people's minds and alter their perspectives. There must be something there, something more than this, you know? But insincerity, it's so pervasive. It's so pervasive that audiences are starting to lose the ability to discern between what's sincere and what's not. And that's a real problem. That's a real problem. And the only way you can refine that is by reading. Reading widely, reading broadly, reading outside of your interests, outside of the authors you like. Picking up random books, just going and buying something from Amazon and starting reading it and seeing what happens, you know? It's the only way to do it. Because then you will sharpen your own perceptions and you'll start to realize, yeah, this person feels something real. They're trying, even if I disagree with them, they are trying to do and say something real. And that is to be applauded. Certainly right now it is. Certainly right now. So yeah, when we come back, ladies and gents, I don't know. We'll have a look. I'm sure there'll be something else for me to rant and rave about. So until...